Okay, welcome back to Strength Coaches React. Today's video is strength conditioning coaches. Bit of a loose term, to be honest, when we're talking about ourselves here, but gets the job done. We are reacting to Robert. I don't want to butcher his last name now, but I know someone's going to correct me anyway. But I'm just going to say Forstemann, and if that's not correct, I don't want to hear about it. All right. We're just
It's
basically
surely
reacting
fairly
to
close.
his. Yeah, you'd think that, but we've been very wrong before. So we're just going to basically react to his squats, right? Because we were looking at his training, we can't really find any more clips of his training other than a random jump or two. But this man has some magnificent squats. He is obnoxious. So the biggest squat we found here, right, is um it seems to be 200 or 295 kilos for a double, and his weight is listed at somewhere in the 95 kilo region.
And they are,
So this appears to be. So it appears to what we're watching here on the screen now, and we'll bring it up for you, is 295 kilos for a double, which is absolutely 96. His high bar squat is immaculate. It is perfect. If there was ever a sport where you could justify squatting heavy and having legs and enormous quads, it would be sprint cycling. So he is seems to have a lot of accolades, right? One thing we don't really know is anything about the sport of sprint cycling or track cycling. So we have no idea. It looks like he's a lot of means, but honestly, there's one Olympic medal in there. Really, other than that, we don't really understand, qualification processes. What we do understand though, sports performance. And if there was ever a sport which would benefit from big, juicy, strong quads, it'd surely be sprint track cycling.
yeah, you have to say, like, looking at his squat there, if you're getting an athlete into you and they're aspiring to, like, put mass on below their belly button, so, like, lower their center mass, which for a sport like velodrome cycling would be very, very advantageous. Aside from obviously increasing their power output, it would just make them better able to stabilize on a bike that's close enough to 45 degrees some of the time when they're going around the velodrome. Uh, Doing squats like this, so it's, as Gerf was saying, it's a very, very nice high bar back squat. But he also has, like, a lot of glute engagement. So a lot of the time we see, like, weightlifters doing a high bar back squat, or people who might have, like, underdeveloped posterior chains, they'll go, like, toes straight ahead, feet super narrow, and they just load their quads, and it makes for a very aesthetic squat, but they get almost no glute development from it. Whereas you see on Robert's squat here, he has, his feet aren't wide, like, it's not a wide stance squat by any means, but his feet are, like, just outside hip width apart, slightly toed out. A great amount of glute recruitment as well as quad recruitment. And look, he's obviously genetically incredibly well disposed to quad development. I think he's called QUADZILLA, in internet circles, or in a lot of the YouTube videos. He seems to be referred to as QUADZILLA anyway.
That's what he's been calling himself anyway. There's multiple videos of him squatting 40 for reps to 10 for reps. Just legitimately near perfect high bar back squats. Oh, there's one I'll bring it up between there. There's a real, I think it seems to be later in his career. It doesn't mean as much in the earlier videos, but when he is squatting um somewhere, it's 200 kilo squats, okay, and we can kind of see a lot of heel lift off the ground. Um, there's probably a better angle with there. So these ones, right? So this probably is from, kind of two reasons. If you watch these squats, it looks like he's actively trying to push up as fast as possible. And so, one of the aspects of all mammals basically is every mammal jumps from their forefoot. So they jump from the front of their foot. And there's a couple of different reasons for that. Like one of them is known as, like, there's a windlass mechanism in your front foot, like a lever. Like, so there's, the muscles along the bottom of your feet are used in jumping, and it looks like in squats when you see his heels coming off the ground. Now I think this might be a reflection of is because of this he's kind of squat them fast. The other thing might be that he's trying to because he's in such an like an his foot is elevated so frequently in squatting. It might be that just eventually years of that does catch up with you in terms of like shortening his Achilles tendon.
Yeah, I think in most sprint sports, you'll get some shortening of the Achilles. Like weightlifting is one of the very, very rare sports where you'll want to lengthen the Achilles tendon and increase mobility in the ankle. Like most sports, if you take almost all of track and field, like sprinting, hurdles, jumps, long jumps, triple jump, all of those, any field sport where you're trying to run fast, you'll be trying to limit, like shorten that Achilles tendon, and you're trying to limit range of motion in the ankle. So if your foot is usually living at 90 degrees, you'd prefer for your foot to be permanently living slightly down. So as Gerf is talking about, like using that windlass mechanism, getting more of a rebound every time your foot hits the ground. And in cycling, it would be very, very similar. So in cycling, most of the time you'd have a slight positive angle in the ankle. So it's toe pointed slightly down all the time. Like as you're bringing that pedal around, you're not going to have your heel will never drop below the level of the pedal. Your heel should always be slightly just above it, and angling down, so it's kind of attacking down as he's stroking back. So it's more than likely like what you're seeing there is like a side effect of all the other training he's doing. He's probably not cueing himself to go up onto his heels. He's probably not kind of like trying to do it. He's probably just, his ankles are just tighter from training.
Another little nuance about that as well is those Adidas weightlifting shootings were notoriously soft in the heel, like incredibly compressible. Like you could squeeze them with hands, and that might be another just reason. Like there is truly no end to the appreciation we have for his high bar back squats. There's video of him here doing like 240 kilos for 6. The 290 for 5 or 290 double is an odd one. It's strange that a coach it's very likely he's coached himself in this or doing most of himself, that a coach would let him go that heavy in terms of, like absolute weight. We see him do a lot of reps, sets of 5, 10s. He seems to go through phases as well of training where he takes big breaks from training, and that's likely when he's in his on season. So then when he's off season, he does a lot of reps, builds a lot of power in his legs, keeps a lot of muscle mass. Very likely though he does an awful lot of other assistance training in his work, because his upper body is absolutely yacked as well. Like clearly does an awful lot of abs. He has an obnoxious amount of rear delts for a cyclist. Like you might say too many rear delts, too much rear delts. There's just too much there. I get the impression that Robert just really likes training in the gym. He likes, judging by the number of shirtless selfies, for good reason. For good reason. He just obviously enjoys training, and a lot of hypertrophy training.
Absolutely.
It is truly. I don't think I've ever seen another athlete outside of weightlifting with high bar squats this heavy and this nice. I can't think of anyone. Can you think of anyone fits?
No. I was thinking just before we started recording, there's no comparison I could make outside of weightlifting, for this kind of the qualitative side to this squat, like just how pretty the squat is, just how nice they look as he goes through the reps. Like I can't think of anybody from outside of, and even powerlifting, I can't really think of anybody. It is like when you were talking about earlier, like going for the heavy single or heavy double, like 650 pounds. That's something we'd very, very rarely see athletes doing. And I know you kind of touched on it earlier, Griff, but like in terms of for just the risk of injury, like if you're an athlete of this level, like an Olympian, a world champion cyclist, you're probably getting coached by 3 or 4 different coaching professionals. They'd very rarely get someone through this. So it is an interesting thing. The thing you brought up, Garf, of like, is he coaching himself for these like heavy singles or heavy doubles? It could be very, very likely, or it could just be that the staff understand how important squatting heavy is to him, and they just say like, okay, it's worth the risk. For a sport like this, for like power sports, most of the time you would see like the upper end maybe being a triple or maybe being a double, But just for the sheer risk of injury, very, very heavy singles would be quite rare. Because like this is the kind of weight whereby things go wrong, and when they go wrong, they go very wrong. This is like breaking a hip territory, not a bit of knee
Mhm.
tendonitis.
So we should point out as well is that um, while he might be very, very good at squatting and he clearly transfers over, he's got that part of his training. His strength and training looks very well covered, like excessively well covered. Like he has hit the nail on the head for his off-season training and his non-sport specific work. But like we often say as well, it, it doesn't make you the best at your sport. Like if you, no matter how good you are at gym work, no matter how good you are at you maximize, you're dedicated, you do the best, you have the best squats, you have the heaviest, whatever lift transfers over the most to your sport. Ultimately, it's only a small part of your sport, and we've seen hundreds, if not thousands, loads of people who are truly like great at their sports, the work in the gyms. Like the most recent example I can think of that is the what's the Michael Jordan documentary called again?
The Last Dance.
The Last Dance, where they got manhandled by one particular team, and then they go into the gym and they're doing like lap pull downs or something, and like they're doing stuff with terrible. It's terrible, like it's upsetting, but it really didn't matter, So
Yeah,
this is a good example of someone who is clearly very talented for strength and power, and obviously he's a very good cyclist, no doubt about that. But it doesn't appear that he's the best cyclist, and I can't imagine though that there's any other cyclist squatting anywhere close to him or anywhere, definitely not more than him, or with
yeah,
anywhere equal muscle mass to his legs.
yeah. I wish we had more kind of nuanced views into power cycling, or like velodrome cycling. To be honest, I've absolutely no idea if he's like top 10 or if he's top 5 or if he's the best in the world. It is like he seems to be very big online, and I have absolutely no doubt he's very big online due to the sheer size of his quads and due to the fact that his squatting is impeccable. Um, and like this is part of the reason we wanted to do one of these review videos, is because people really enjoy watching very, very high quality, high bar back squats with heavy weight. The thing, like Joe, about being talented at a sport, you can literally think of like the Last Dance documentary is the perfect example. You can think of umpteen examples of people who are just very, very, very talented at a sport, and they hate the S&C work or they hate the gym work or whatever it is. I think there's also something to be like gained if you're a young athlete or a developing athlete and you're watching something like this, or you're just getting into a sport and watching something like this. So physical prowess or being incredibly physically talented, so like Robert is here, realizing fully your entire genetic potential in certain areas of physical training. So whether that being incredibly strong for your sport, incredibly fast for your sport, having very high power outputs, having ranges of motion in excess of what you may need, because you go down this route so specifically, right? So if you're an 18-year-old rugby player now and you're pretty good at playing, but you want to take the next step or the next increase in your prowess. So you might be going from underage to senior, or you might be going from school's team to a college team, right? Picking something like physical adaptation can be very, very good. So if you're just trying to improve at a sports skill, if you play a team sport, that's very, very difficult, right? You're not going to be able to get 15 lads to play against 15 lads at 7 o'clock on a Thursday evening so you can improve your ability to play the game. But if you say, I'm going to be the strongest player in that position in my club, or I'm going to be the fastest player in that position, or I'm going to be the most resilient to injury player in that position, that allows you to pick one thing or two things, really, really dial in on that one thing, and then make yourself so much better than everybody else just at that, Or it could be your mental game around kicking or set pieces is so much stronger than everybody else's. This is a way you can go out and become a much, much better athlete at your sport without necessarily being able to constantly practice your sport.
Probably the last point in as well is like the transfer of high bar back squatting over to sprinting, or sorry, track sprinting or cycle sprinting, it's probably the next sport after weightlifting, high bar squats, where it's a very quad dominant movement. It's probably the next closest sport with the most squat. So for like track sprinting, as in like physical running, running on a field or something, squats seem to be hit or miss depending on who you look at, who you talk to, what athletes do it in terms of like how much does a squat transfer over. There's a whole different level of nuances. But aside from that, the mechanics of the same kind of angles in terms of like track sprinting and the power output you need, um, I would I would feel like on paper it would look like that high bar back squats would transfer over incredibly well to that sport in terms of as much as you can possibly get from transfer over.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the fact that when you're like in sprinting, in standard sprinting, there's a huge amount of factors that limit just leg strength. So absolute strength is one of the most important things for sprinting, but you need absolute strength with perfect stride length. You need low impact time on the ground, high ground reactive forces. You need all these things to happen at once. And I think when you put somebody into a velodrome, so like a sloped track, which will guide them around the track, you strap their feet into click on like pedals. So their feet are permanently clicked into the bike. It allows for like a level of force transfer that doesn't really happen in sprinting. Like obviously you wear spikes when you're sprinting on a track. The track is in some way reactive and in some way has a very, very good friction value that allows you to put force in. But it's not the same value as you being clipped onto the pedals of your bike and able to push really, really, really hard.
Thanks for watching, lads. This is more reacting to squats and then trying out a little bit of information on sports training or gym training for sports, or non-sport specific training. It's a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B. If you liked it, we would appreciate a like and a subscribe and a comment if all three are possible. And if not, have a nice week.